Well, I'm in the process of visiting the 20 Mule Team Borax wagon build that we did in 2016, and through that process I am taking 720 quality video, bringing it up to date to the 1080. So today's video is actually posted on April 2nd and April 3rd of 2017, well after we had already been through the Rose Parade of January 2nd of 2017. I was behind a deadline schedule and I did not post any videos from September to the end of that year. So posting these videos actually happened after we were back from that parade. But this is the process of building the wagons and getting them assembled onto the front and rear axle. Preparing to build these boxes for the Borax wagons, we assembled about 1,000 feet of 1.5-inch yellow poplar, and also the main beams that will hold the main part of the box together. We also took ash and made the framework that will go underneath the box that all the iron will attach to, and the frames that will go up the sides that will actually give strength to the sideboards. So these beams are 4-inch wide, 5-inch thick, 16 feet long, and you see they're not quite straight. So in getting ready to put the floorboards on the framework here, I'm going to take and make sure that we have our framing square to begin with. So I've cut some spaces for the front. That's going to give us the width that we need when it sits on the gear. And we have a little bow in the center of these 16-foot long beams, so we're also going to put a spacer in the center and pull these beams where they need to be so they are straight. And these beams are going to be what holds the floor. So in order to make sure that this wagon box is going to be square, I'm first going to take and measure from corner to corner and make sure that our framework is square so we can start to fasten the floorboards onto the framework. This happens to be the front end of the wagon, and I have all my floorboards cut to width and planed to width, and we're going to begin to assemble the floorboards. So even between the front clamp and the middle clamp, I'm going to put another clamp and just make sure everything is straight. Now it might seem kind of odd, but we want all the nails to be symmetrically spaced, so I take the time to mark them out. And being hardwood, actually going to pre-drill everything so that when we nail these boards on, that they don't end up splitting out the ends of the boards. These old original wagons were nailed on, they weren't fastened with screws. And so we're using a nailer here to put in a round head nail so that they will have the finish head just like the original ones. The only advantage is here I'm using an air nailer instead of putting everyone in by hand. But as we progress down the bed of the body, we're going to continue to make sure that we are straight and everything is in the right positions. This will be the second to the last floorboard, and this will be the last one that I'll put on at this time. I'm going to leave the very last one off until we get the sideboards on and the tailgate on. Then the width of that board will be determined at that point. So now with our floorboards on, we're beginning to assemble the sideboards. We're going to take the yellow poplar and attach it to the main frame. And we have it marked out the spacing where all the upright 2x4 ash framework needs to go. So initially here I'm going to clamp the framework in their correct positions. Each of these are bolted to the side panels themselves. This all gets bolted together with 1/2-inch carriage bolts and square nuts. One through the board, and then we're also going to put a 1/2-inch bolt through the main frame. This is going to give us the correct spacing of the framework, and this is what actually gives strength to the sideboards when the weight of the borax is fully loaded upon these wagons. When our spacing of our framework is there, then it's just a matter of continuing to build our sides up and attach them to the framework as we go up. So this is just the step-by-step process of building the sides of the boxes themselves, getting them in position, getting them bolted to the 2x4 ash frame, and it's just a matter of a lot of holes, a lot of drilling, and attaching them to the framework of the box themselves. And everything is clamped into place so our joints are tight And everything, of course, is double checked for square and straight as we go up. The top board is only going to be about 9 inches in width, where the side boards, predominantly, they are all 11-inch wide. Now, before we've assembled these, we actually go through and do some sanding on them too. And this is Mark Smith that runs a cabinet shop here in town. He stopped by and helped run the orbital sander. And you can see as he's sanding in the process of building both wagon boxes, trying to keep them going at the same time. So inside the 2x4 framework, there is a significant amount of ironwork that goes up. These are 3/8 thick, 2-inch wide, and they all have to be drilled. So you can see the only one in the shop here that has any color. This is my wife Diane, as she set up and drilled hole after hole after hole in these side irons. And we put them in and drilled them out for 1/2-inch bolts. And then the first ones we're going to put on are the irons for the front of the box. So here the first one goes on the inside, and then the outside one is actually attached and bent over so it is bolted to the inside iron. And then these ends, both front and back, are actually sandwiched together with 1/2-inch bolts. So underneath the box there's a number of cross framing, and the irons that go up the side are also attached to these cross frame. So we're going to position all these in their proper place, and with the use of a floor jack we're going to position those into the right place, and then we're going to fasten the iron to the sideboards. And there's a couple of bolts that go through each board. Make sure these are all evenly spaced. And then the bolt that goes through the framework has a nut on the bottom of each one. This framework here is a little longer. This is the 2 framework that carries the water barrel on each side. But each one of these cross frame members has an iron strap that goes through them and is bolted to the sideboard. So actually the weight that is carried on these cross frames is transferred to the upright boards, and that's what gives these boxes their real strength. Now you've noticed all these nuts and bolts and everything we put in there. Well, there's a process that they all go through, and there's about 1,000 of these that went into these boxes. Well, in the 1880s, the style of carriage bolt heads were different than they are today. So we went through with every single one of these carriage heads and ground them off to make them look like the 1880s style bolts. They come down right to the edge. They don't have any markings, and when you put them up against the modern carriage bolt today, you know, the modern bolt has kind of a rounded flat end, and they have these little stamped marks on the heads. Well, every one of these bolts was run past the sander, and we ground them down to an edge and took off all the casting marks. And then they needed to be all cut to the proper length. So we made little jigs to go in the chop saw, and we could just cut them all to the proper length that they needed to be. Well, when these are cut off in the chop saw and ground off, they have bright, shiny ends. So in order to get rid of that shiny new look, we took the torch and we bring the iron of the bolt to a bright red. That kind of melts all these grinding marks together, and then we dip them in used motor oil. In the process of doing that, the steel takes on this flat black look. So we do that to the thread end, which you saw I just did, and then we're going to take the head of the bolts that was just ground off and take them up to a bright, almost a white color. And this is what actually gets rid of some of those grinding marks. Well, we can't quench them in the oil when they're that bright red hot, or they would ignite in the oil. So about every third bolt, we go back to the first one, and it's finally cooled down enough that it can be quenched in oil. So we'll quench it, polish it with a steel wire brush, and then we have this flat, black, old style bolt. This has to be done to every bolt, has to be done to every washer, has to be done to every nut. Everything is taken up to red, let it cool down, and then quenched in oil. So the front panel of each of these wagons has some framework to it, and this is a picture of an old one. And so these panels have to be situated in order to place these upright panels. These panels are removable. The top one especially oftentimes is removed. But we're going to make sure everything is square. And in this case, the front sideboards were not quite square. So you can see I'm putting clamps on at an angle. I'm going to pull this top over to the left and square up the sideboard so that they sit square against the front panel. And when that is all square, then I can go ahead and put all these bolts together, and that's what helps hold this front panel square. And eventually these get chains put across side to side on the front, and that's what helps hold this whole box square. These end up having two separate panels, the bottom one now done, and the top panel has to be put in. So I'm just kind of pre-fitting everything here to make sure the widths are right. And we'll take and put a clamp across the top and make sure everything fits accordingly first. Well, then we're going to I'm going to take these all out, and we'll assemble these on a flat panel now that I know that they're going to fit. The upright pieces, and I'm going to mark all them out. We're going to drill all the holes. So once they're actually back on the box, I'm going to use those holes as our template to drill into the top panel. And again, all these get 1/2-inch bolts that have been quenched and blackened. And it's just a lot of bolt to put each of these boxes together. So here we have the front panels, the side frames, the irons. So inside this front panel is also another cleat that's going to hold it in position. And this also gets bolted in with 1/2-inch bolts. You notice we take the time to make sure every square nut is actually square with the body. So this is the inside when it looks like when it's been finished, all the bolt heads. This is the outside, all the framework is together. Obviously we're building 2 wagons at once, so we have to do everything to the second wagon. This shows both wagons that are finished to this point. Then we're going to take and spray everything with the linseed oil, same as we did the running gear. Now that we have the boxes assembled and we have them sprayed with oil, the next thing I want to do is take the boxes and set them down on the running gears, both the front and the rear axle. And the reason I want to do this is the ironwork that is left has to be incorporating both the box and the gear. The brake assembly as it goes on has to interact between the two. So we want to set these down on the gear. You see I have a framework that sets up over the top of these boxes. I use it for coaches and carriages and buggies, to where I can lift these bodies up and slide the gears underneath. And that's what I'm going to do with these borax boxes also. It allows me to put 4 come-alongs, and so going from corner to corner, I can pick these bodies up and free them from the stands or the dollies or whatever. In this case, they're sitting on sawhorses, and I can free them from the sawhorses. This will allow to give us free access to roll the undercarriages under. So this is a time-consuming process, just bit by bit, lifting these bodies up. I've measured the standards on the axles and have determined how high I have to lift these up for these axles to clear. After having reached that height, the first one we're going to bring out to set under the box is the rear axle. Since we are going from the front to the back, this rear axle has to go the complete length underneath this body. So we're going to bring it out and just kind of jockey it under position. Now you'll notice on the sawhorses underneath the body that I have them set on blocks, so that they aren't sitting there just kind of blowing in the wind until I get the running gear kind of in position where it can start to go under the box. As I get it kind of positioned a little bit, the sawhorse is going to be in the way, so I have to lift the box up again, just gently, to where these will be free from the blocks, and then I can take the sawhorse out of the way. That will give access to roll the undercarriage underneath the box. This is always kind of a nerve-wracking time because everything is hanging on the come-alongs at this point. So this is just kind of an inch by inch time-consuming process. I don't want to bump the body. I don't want to create any kind of a wreck or any kind of a problem here. So it's just piece by piece, inch by inch, positioning this gear underneath the body. Now, because the brake arm is so tall, it has to go off to one side. It needs to clear the framework where the water barrels are going to sit. So I'm pushing it out around the water barrel framework, and then I'm going to push it back underneath in its correct position. So I have enough room here. I really like to have, for safety's sake, something underneath these boxes if anything was ever to happen. I've never had one drop. I've never had a problem, but I'm always pretty cautious. As soon as I can, I like to have as much support under these bodies as possible. So I'll set it down just enough to where it's not wiggling in the wind anymore. And I can do a little bit of adjusting as I need to in the back if that's necessary. Now the back axle is kind of in place. I need to bring out the front axle. And you'll notice it's up on a pretty high stand. This is where we built it. Well, I need to get it down onto the dolly itself. And I don't show all that because it's kind of a slow process to do that. I jack it up, I put pillars of blocks underneath, and then piece by piece I bring it down to the dolly. And it's kind of a boring process. But here you can see that I've got it down on the dolly, and I can begin to position it into place to line up with the back axle. So in order to attach the back axle to the front axle, I need to pull the kingpin. So I've taken off the front bolster, and I'm going to remove the kingpin. That will allow me to couple the two together. Well, in order to bring the front axle back to where it can meet the reach on the back axle, I have to get the sawhorse out of the way. So I'm going to remove my blocks, and again this box is going to be just hanging on the come-alongs, so I can get this sawhorse out of the way and couple the front axle to the rear axle. Now if you watch the building of the front axle and the back axle, you can see how the two come together, and they're pinned together with the kingpin. So when that's together, and before I put the bolster back on, now's a good time, I'm going to put a little grease on the fifth wheel plates. Then I can reassemble the front bolster over the kingpin, and that's where the front of the box will set down between those standards. So now we can inch it into place, get it a little closer to the correct position. When I get it into position, again, I like to have support. So I'm going to put blocks underneath it to stabilize it. So one end is stable while I'm lowering the back end. I'll take it out and I'll lower it one block at a time. Each block is a 2x6, so 1.5 inches at a time. Well, on the back axle, there's a cleat that saddles the bolster, and this is bolted to the box. This is what keeps the box from shifting. So these, before I drop the box down onto the rear bolster, these cleats have to be put into position. And you see how it just saddled over the rear bolster. There's one on each side, so then the box can sit down onto these cleats and be bolted into position. Then the box will no longer shift front to back. So once I have this down on the axles, all the blocks are taken out, I can go ahead and remove the come-alongs and the bars underneath, and this is what it looks like when it's set down on the axle. The second box will actually go in the other direction. It'll move from the rear forward. So we put both axles together, and then Calvin here is helping, and we can move this underneath, and it's the same process of getting into position, putting in our blocks, making sure it's stable, and then setting it down on the axle just 1.5 inches at a time until it's finally down. So this is what it looks like when the box is sitting down on the gears, and we can go ahead and start to do some of the finish ironwork. So I just want to give a special thanks to all of you who have ordered the Borax Legacy jackets. Hopefully you have all received yours by now. I did order a few extras, so if you are interested, you can email us at david@engelscoachshop.com. Send us your address and the size that you would like, and Diane will send you an invoice specific to your shipping address. They are $79.95 plus shipping. So once again, appreciate revisiting the 10th year anniversary of building the wagons, and I hope you enjoy the better quality that they are now. Appreciate you coming along. Thanks for watching.